Velina is finally here, and she might just be one of the strongest anomaly agents we've seen yet. After testing her in the CE server, I'm convinced she's going to disrupt the meta in a big way, and possibly even raise some balance concerns in the immediate future. She's the first Wind attribute character in the game, and beyond her own kit, she is a serious team-wide buff for every anomaly agent through her Vortex uptime. She's doing Wind and then other people doing Vortex, but you get what I'm saying, whatever. Anyway, today I'm running through a mini guide on how to play her and giving you my full impressions on where she lands in the meta and why it might also be a problem. Yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so Velina's whole thing is based around the new Wind attribute. To briefly explain Wind, it's just like the other attributes where if you build up a certain amount of meter against an enemy, it'll trigger a special effect. Windswept has a higher level of interrupts versus enemies and deals a big chunk of wind damage. While under the Windswept state, enemies take increased damage from wind-based attacks, and whenever they first take another instance of attribute damage, the contamination effect is going to trigger. The entire state lasts for 30 seconds, which is a surprisingly long time, but I promise you it's necessary. Just with Jane, I was able to take her regular unbuffed assault from 300k to over 500k through the contamination effect. Another cool thing is that under normal anomaly circumstances, whenever you combo one on top of the other, it would trigger a disorder. Because of Windswept though, now it triggers a new effect called Vortex, which essentially replaces disorder. So even though you can only alter the effects of the tornado Velina creates once, the actual attribute of Vortex can change based on whichever was the last to trigger it. A strong advantage to this compared to Disorder is that it increases the power of that specific attribute for another single burst of damage, making it great for teams or characters that want to focus on a more mono-element playstyle. The second advantage is that unlike Disorder, which clears the attribute after it happens, Vortex doesn't clear anything. Wind is still there, which allows your team to repeatedly trigger as many vortexes as you can until Windswept runs out. That is one of the biggest reasons I hinted earlier in the video that Velina was a little too good. So for a simple understanding of what do I do with Windswept, your goal should be to just spam as many attribute counters within a 30-second window as you can. The only downside is that if a character needs specific functions from a disorder to take advantage of their kit, then unfortunately, you just can't activate those abilities. Vortex does not count as disorder. You also can't remove Wind, which may be important later down the road. We don't really have a reason to worry about that right now though. Now, if you ask me to explain what Velina does, it's actually ridiculously simple. Velina's entire shtick is creating gigantic tornadoes and infesting the field with wind. Like she's literally just playing Harpy's hunting ground on the field for free anytime she wants. With one EX, she'll throw wind shears at the enemy. Her EX2 is a follow-up move and has her doing some cool flip before building up 45 points of wind bloom. Your goal is to get 90 points, then unleash her signature move, Eye of the Storm, which is a huge sweeping cyclone that now has the ability to trigger something called a chromatic tint effect. It also triggers a reverse quick assist, meaning your DPS agent needs to be in front of Velina for the turn order, or in particular, when you're looking at your team select screen, DPS in front, then Velina, then other support or stunned or whatever. Chromatic tint itself also reduces the attribute anomaly buildup res of that element, and if you take out an enemy during Cyclone, it'll extend the duration of it by 5 more seconds. She also triggers a big ass of bloom whenever the tornado disappears for almost 300% base multiplier damage. So yeah, there's that. What's cool is that there are 2 different ways to trigger her sweeping cyclone capable of triggering chromatic tint. The first one is going to be whenever she has 2 points of wind bite, you trigger anybody's vortex and then sweeping cyclone happens. The second way, after accumulating 90 points of wind bloom, is going to be holding basic attack or special, and then another sweeping cyclone is going to come out. All of her tornadoes have some massive AoE attached to it, making their crowd control effects some of the most insane in the game. This might not be important for a mode like Deadly Assault, but in Shiyu defense, this is going to be a huge buff to your clear times. So the general idea is to balance your team's combos around how often you can manipulate the amount of vortexes and cyclones for big PP damage. She has a 150% vortex damage multiplier, a 14% res shred for both wind and the chromatic tint attribute, a 30% daze increase, another 10% damage increase to her own windswept and vortex abilities, and another anomaly buildup increase of 15% underneath sweeping cyclones. This character is nutty for every anomaly agent in the game, one way or the other. Now that we've covered the basics of how Velina works, let's talk about how she actually performs in practice. I tested her across a wide range of teams, and what stood out most is just how consistently she elevates whatever she's paired with. Whether you're a day one player or you're just getting started, I promise there's a team here for you. So I want to break down everything from easiest to most demanding. Now, if you're looking for the most accessible team Velina has to offer, I feel like this is it. Piper and Velina are ridiculously easy to pick up and immediately rewarding to play. The stun rotation is very straightforward. You don't have to think much at all, and the double physical pairing between Piper and Yuzuha actually works in your favor. You can swap off Piper during her longer animations and let Yuzuha step in to ensure the assault proc is going to trigger, which smooths out the flow of the team considerably and doesn't force you to stay on Piper for too long. On top of that, Piper's enhanced spin naturally helps build wind bite points at a consistent pace, keeping Velina well fed with resources to dump multiple cyclones throughout the entire fight. This team is also extremely free-to-play friendly. In the footage you're watching, I got Piper to perform with nearly 40k points on her signature A-Rank W engine, and only Velina's signature, so there's no pressure to invest heavily to see results. If you're a new player and really want to jump into Anomaly, don't sleep on Piper. Velina is a massive boost to her place in the meta, and this team is proof of that. This next team, I'm going to try and be upfront as I possibly can. I'm not the best at playing the new Bernice efficiently at all. Haven't had a reason to touch her since the potential unlock, but what I can tell you is that she naturally slots into Velina's kit and produces a genuinely strong team regardless. Despite me not being a Bernice main, the constant off-field fire and wind application is excellent, and it means Velina almost always has a wind point ready to go. On top of that, the double of blooms from both Bernice and Velina add a nice layer of additional damage that keeps the offensive pressure going. The one thing to be aware of is that the constant meter buildup from both characters makes it tricky to track which attribute you're supposed to trigger your most damaging on blooms off of, so there's a bit of a learning curve in managing all that. The buff up time across the team is also a little demanding to juggle, making the experience I guess chaotic in a way, but at the same time, it's high-key fun trying to figure out what a main DPS Bernice can dish out. That said, if you're one of the players who've already invested into Bernice, this is a great reason to consider picking up more copies of her or her W engine from the free shop in the game. After those teams, we take a step into some that require a little more skill and understanding, but still provide solid results. Yanagi and Velina are a team with some pretty interesting synergy once you understand how it works. The key detail here is that because the initial shock from Yanagi triggers before the vortex effect, she can still proc her signature polarity disorder, which is huge for her own personal damage. Your parries should either be shared between Velina and Yanagi for extra energy, or fueled entirely to Velina depending on where the daze bar is. When using Nagi as the main DPS, she's going to build shock consistently fast, especially with Yuzuha on the team, and that makes keeping the uptime on both of her buffs easier to manage. Seth is, surprisingly, an alternative to Yuzuha, but having two reverse quick assist on the same team isn't ideal. If you do go that route, you have to use the Seth finisher tech that I taught you guys in my previous Seth guide in order to hand off the shield to Yanagi at the start of a stun window. Now, this team does feel like it reaches stun slightly slower than the others, but that's more of a feel thing instead of a hard conclusion. I'm sure Zena or anybody else is going to figure it out for me later. There's also a deeper layer of combat here for players willing to dig into it. Learning to weave polarity disorder procs in between windswept, shock, and vortex triggers has a lot of damage ceiling to explore. If the energy is there, it could potentially skyrocket the team's damage performance overall. Now, this team is one of the teams that all of us believed was going to be Velina's best in slot, and arguably could be Velina's best in slot. Personally, it honestly might sit right behind Jane when everything starts to click together. Promia and Velina is that team, and Promia's evasive counter playstyle creates an incredibly fluid experience during combat. You're also always on the offensive thanks to their combination of EX skill abilities, and the kit naturally syncs well with how Velina operates. The main challenge here is stack management. Keeping Promia's bloom stacks topped off is easy when she's focused on just herself, but when you're also chasing properly timed stun windows and you want a minimum of 3 stuns per fight, the whole thing starts demanding more attention than you initially think. The upside is that it's easier to line up all your buffs before cashing out on Promia's bloom combos, which leads to higher, more consistent damage overall. The lack of disorders does hurt Promia's stack regeneration, so that's worth keeping in mind, but I really don't think it's a deal breaker by any means. They seem to work very well together and probably built that way. After Promia, there's Arya, and Honestly, it bothers me a little that this team casually outperforms Arya's actual signature team with Nangong Yu and Suna, but you know, gotcha games. So yay, here we are. The Velina and Yuzuha core gives Arya the freedom to do essentially whatever she wants throughout the entire fight. And Arya's ability to trigger her blooms on command is exceptionally strong within the Cyclone. Velina's sweeping Cyclone also doubles as a tool to hold bosses in place, which opens up clean windows for Arya's Peach Bomber combos. The trade-off is that dropping Suna and Nangong means fewer stuns, which cuts into some of Arya's biggest damage windows. It also requires slightly revised routing to make sure that Arya gets everything she needs out of the stun combo. With better routing, I'm confident this team can push 55 to 60k against Vesper. And it's honestly possible that you could kill at M0 right here and now. Arya might genuinely be the best anomaly DPS to run alongside Velina out of the entire roster, which is kinda awkward but hard to argue with the results. Finally, we dip our toes into teams that I'd say have a higher skill ceiling than the other anomaly teams, but still surprise me by providing ridiculous results. Alice and Velina is a surprisingly strong hypercarry setup, but it comes with some trade-offs that I personally don't like. However, you might love them. With Velina on the team, there's a less incentive to lean into Alice's quick swap playstyle, because if she stays on field, she'll trigger 4 attribute counters at once instead of just 2 when she uses her EBA. At the very least, you can technically cheat this by rotating in a Yuzuha before the final hit of Alice's EBA to secure 4 assault procs instead of 2 anyway, since they're both physical agents. That shift in routing means building energy across the team takes more deliberate play rather than relying on disorder combos to help refill Alice's special meter. One important technique to keep in mind is literally the assist counter. I know it's hard and almost impossible on mobile, but it's way more beneficial here than Velina's standard defensive assist, since Alice's assist counter grants her 25 blade etiquette. Since Velina's defensive assist is already 28 hours long, you can take advantage of her and Alice doing what they need to do on field. This gives you days, this gives you decibels for both, more meter gain on both, and it locks the enemy in place for a few seconds. If you can consistently pull this off, it's a meaningful change for hypercarry Alice to keep her meter up, since Wind completely removes her ability to gain points from disorder. Alice also burns through energy at an aggressive pace, so that needs to be factored into how you structure each of your rotations. On the boss front, enemies that move or disappear frequently can dodge Alice's EBA entirely, making it crucial to time Velina's own EBA properly to lock them down. If you can get that right, the team performs at a much higher level. Yuzuha is required, and the lack of disorders does slow point accumulation, but this team rewards players who invest in learning its tricky playstyle. Of course, I'm not gonna forget the big one. Yes, I know what I said about Wind versus Miyabi, and no, I'm not taking back what I said. However, I will say even this one surprised me more than I thought. Wind is inherently against Miyabi's game plan as a mechanic. I believe anyone that understands what Miyabi wants out of her teammates and how she abuses her EBAs understands that fact. But leaning into an AP focused build rather than crit actually does a solid job of working around that Wind based counter. AM Miyabi builds Frost fast and consistently, which helps activate multiple cyclones within a 30-second window, and the combination of Isoblooms and Vortexes hits hard. For context, I want to take a look at the Vortex damage multiplier for just a second. Frost Freeze lasts 20 seconds, and time is multiplied by the 75% multiplier in the formula, which turns the entire thing into a 1500% multiplier. I think Ice Freeze is like 1300% or something like that, but Miyabi uses Frost, which means this is the damage she's getting for her Vortexes. And now that we're bringing up math, this actually answers why Arya was casually outperforming her signature team with Velina. Arya has an extra passive built into her kit where she extends the duration of corruption state by 3 extra seconds, which actually gets calculated into the same Vortex formula we just showed on screen. So where everyone else gets a 1900 multiplier because of the original corruption formula, Arya gets to donkey kick whatever she wants in the head with a whopping 2275% multiplier because she gets her own custom corruption formula. Brother, no wonder she feels like Velina's best partner. That said, back to Miyabi glazing, the team does still have limitations you need to manage. Building EBA is noticeably slower here, and Velina's inability to clear Miyabi's Frostburn status means you need to carefully manage fallen frost stacks to avoid losing momentum. Unfreezable bosses also hurt this team inside the stun window, which can be pretty frustrating. On the positive side, Miyabi's EBA and Velina's longer animations actually complement each other very well for capitalizing on field time, and the team is packed with iframes, free dodge counters, and a constant flurry of attacks that makes it feel dynamic. Once again, Yuzuha is needed here, and energy management on Miyabi requires attention because you will run out of meter otherwise. But if you're willing to work within those constraints, the team performs beyond my initial expectations. I have to admit that. Finally, we have the team I was the most anticipant for, Jane and Velina. This team impressed me the most across all of my testing, and purely for the love of the game. The synergy is strong. Jane forces vortexes to crit, which is a massive damage amplifier throughout the entire fight, and the assist counter technique is especially valuable in this pairing because it helps keep Jane's signature W engine passive active while extending her passion state. If you lose that passion state after the first control skill, you're really going to start seeing assaults drop from 2 to 3 million all the way down to 400k. This is also one of the reasons why players say Jane is significantly harder to pilot compared to Piper or Alice. This is a fast-paced team with a genuinely high skill ceiling. One of the most important things to learn is how to combo flinch with Velina's EVA Cyclone to stun like bosses, which lets you skip or delay certain phases entirely, and that's important for routing. Working towards that stun consistently requires learning the routing, but the payoff is significant. The team also burns through Yuzuha's candy points quickly, so that resource needs to be managed carefully. And just like Bernice, if you've already invested in her, then this is the perfect time to use that shop and pick up more copies. Now, I personally don't know if her W engine is worth extra copies, but it probably wouldn't hurt if you just randomly had a bunch of those tickets lying around. And if you're running them to Jane, the performance here is genuinely ridiculous. This is easily one of the most fun individual team interactions I've played in a long time. So where does that leave us with Velina overall? Honestly, I'm kind of terrified of what this character's presence is going to do to the game. I love how powerful she is, but we've never gotten this strong of an account boosting agent that requires zero mechanical skill to play without the devs doing something ridiculous afterwards. Across every team I tested, she brought something meaningful to the table, whether that was raw damage amplification, better buff up time, or just making certain agents significantly easier to pilot within the team. She moves the skill floor to wherever the team needs, raises the actual floor of Anomaly performance as a whole, and the damage ceiling is even higher in the right hands. The thing I keep coming back to is Velina's arrival feels like a turning point for Anomaly as a whole. When you look at the Season 3 landscape, it's becoming increasingly clear that most competitive Anomaly teams are going to want either Velina or Nangong Yu, and in many cases, in fact all of them, Yuzuha is on top of that. That puts players in a real position of having to choose, and it makes building out an Anomaly roster expensive. This is no longer a cheap damage class to pilot. That said, I think that cost comes with a reason. Anomaly has been officially cemented as one of, if not the strongest damage classes in the game, and Velina is a big part of why. She doesn't just fit into the meta, she's helping define it. If you play Anomaly seriously, she's not really a question of if, it's a question of when, and based on everything I've seen and tested, sooner is better than later. Now guys, thank you for watching today's video. This was a big struggle for me to do. I really don't get sick, but I've been sick all week. And if you couldn't tell, I've had a lot of difficulties having extended breaths. So it's been hard trying to write everything. It took a long time. It took me 3 days to write everything out. It took me 3 days to test. So it was a lot to get like all the footage and everything that I needed for this. But regardless of the fact, thank you for watching today's video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Let me know if you're going to be getting Velina. I am pulling Velina. I'm going for M1W1 personally. I just think she's a very strong character. I don't want to miss out on that. And I want to be prepared for whenever Remiel gets here, which has been officially confirmed by the developers themselves that if you want Remiel, you absolutely want Velina. There may be a workaround around that, but after what I've played, I really don't think that's the case. Anyway, I'm done talking. I'm gonna get out of here. I can't say my usual outro because it's inappropriate for YouTube. Like the video, comment, subscribe. Smell you later. My goodness, bro, that should not have taken me 30 minutes. That was such a hard recording.